Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We'll be learning today Mir Hashem Daf Samach Tes Amud Aleph. We continue to learn Hilchos Rosh Hashanah, and we begin today on the second line of Samach Tes Amud Aleph in Siman Tavkuf Tzadik Zayin Sif Gimel. It says the Mechaber, Hamesane Pamachas B'Rosh Hashanah Tainus Chaloim. If somebody even once fasts a Tainus Chaloim on Rosh Hashanah. So this means that he had a dream on during the day, he had a dream at night on Rosh Hashanah that required him to fast during the day on Rosh Hashanah to be mavatal of that chaloim. He had one of the types of bad chaloimos, bad dreams, for which the halacha says you should fast in order to be mavatal of the chaloim. If that happened even once, says the Mechaber, Im haya b'yom rishain, if this occurred on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, tzarich lehisanos shnei hayamim, he has to fast both days of Rosh Hashanah, but not at night. We learned previously that fasting at night on Rosh Hashanah is treated more stringently than fasting during the day. You cannot fast at night, but during the day, if he has to fast for a tainus chaloim, so then tzarich lehisanos shnei hayamim kol yamav. So if a person once had a bad dream on the first night of Rosh Hashanah that required him to fast a tainus chaloim on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, then, says the Mechaber, for the rest of his life, he has to fast both days, not nights, but both days of Rosh Hashanah. If he had the dream on the second night of Rosh Hashanah, so that he had to fast on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, then Yisane Kol Yom of Yom Sheni Bilvad. Then he only has to fast on the second day of Rosh Hashanah for the rest of his life. He doesn't have to fast both days, he only has to fast the second day. Now what's going on over here? Let's take a look in the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Zayin. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Tainus Chaloim. The first thing the Chavetz Chaim tells us is, V'himu Safik, Imhu Me'achaloim Oishem Esanin B'Shabbos. If we have a question whether or not this dream rises to the level of a dream that would require you to fast even on Shabbos for a tainus chaloim, ein lehisanos, then you should not fast. Ois cotton ches. So the Mechaber said, if you had to fast on the first day of Rosh Hashanah for a tainus chaloim, then for the rest of your life you have to fast both days of Rosh Hashanah for the rest of your life. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Ois cotton ches shnei hayamim. Why? Why do you have to fast both days? Like we're going to see later in today's shir, and this is something that we've discussed many times. The 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are not treated like any other 2 days of Yom Tov. The 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are treated as a kedusha arichta. They're considered one long day of Yom Tov. So, if there's a chaloim, if there's a dream that required you to fast on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, for the rest of your life, you have to fast both days of Rosh Hashanah, because we're going to treat the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah as one day. So if you had to fast on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, you got to fast both days of Rosh Hashanah from now on. Oif cotton test, kol yamav, you have to fast for the rest of your life. So the first thing the Chavetz Chaim tells us here is, when we call makom, nevertheless, even though the Mechaber is writing this very stringently, and he's saying you're going to have to fast for the rest of your life, if you're not afraid. Let's remember that we learned previously in Sif Beis. The Mechaber said on Samaches Amid Beis in Sif Beis that there's Yesh Mekaimos. There are those places, Shekabala B'Yadam, where they had a Mesorah, that somebody who is rugil to fast on Rosh Hashanah, somebody who's in the habit of fasting on Rosh Hashanah, and 1 year he doesn't fast, then Einoi Mashlim Shenasai, then they had a Kabbalah that you will not live out the year. But the Ramah said on Sif Beis, on the top of Samach Tes Amud Aleph, the Ramah said, Umisha Eina Yarei L'Nafshay, if somebody is not afraid, if somebody doesn't have this fear, then ain't tzarich lehisanis kol yamav. Then he doesn't have to fast for the rest of his life just because for a few years. The Chavetz Chaim said that what does it mean in Sif Beis when it says misha ragil lehisanos, someone who's in the habit of fasting? The Chavetz Chaim said in Ois Cotton Dalet on the bottom of Samaches Amid Beis, hainu shalosh pa'amim. So the Mechaber said, if you fasted 3 times on Rosh Hashanah, so then there are those regions where they had this Kabbalah, if you fasted 3 times, you had to fast for the rest of your life. But the Ramah disagreed with that. The Ramah said, Misha Eina Yarei L'Nafshay, if you're not afraid, if you're not worried about this, then you don't have to fast for the rest of your life. You could have a HaTorah. You could go get HaTorah's Nedarim, because a minig toiv 3 times is like a neder. So you fasted 3 times on Rosh Hashanah. That could be considered a minig toiv that you did 3 times, because there are those who consider fasting on Rosh Hashanah a mitzvah. So you should go do HaTorah's Nedarim, and then you don't have to fast. If you're yorei, if you have a fear, then you should fast. But if you don't have a fear, you don't have to fast. Over here in Siv Gimel, the Mechaber is telling us that if you had to fast even once because of a Tainas Chaloim, so now it's different than Siv Beis. Siv Beis was Misha Ragil Lihisanos, somebody who's in the habit of fasting, which means he fasted at least 3 times. In Siv Gimel, the Mechaber is talking about somebody who only fasted once, but he fasted because of a Tainas Chaloim. Then the Mechaber said you have to fast for the rest of your life. Why? You only fasted once. It doesn't reach the level of Siv Beis. It's Siv Beis you fasted 3 times. So on that, the Trumas Hadeshen says the reason is because when you fast once because of a Tainas Chaloim, that means that in Shamayim they foisted the Tainas upon you. They gave you a Chaloim in Mina Shamayim that required you to fast. So that, even if it happens only once, you have to fast for the rest of your life. But the Chavetz Chaim says over here in Siv Tes that the same Ramah, the same halacha of the Ramah in Siv Beis applies over here too. If you're not afraid, if you're not nervous about it, then you don't have to fast. Then even if you had to fast because of a Tainas Chaloim, so you fasted once for a Tainas Chaloim, but you don't have to fast again in the future. Now we go to Siv Yud. Now, the Mechaber told us that there's a difference between if you had to fast a Tainas Chaloim on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, or you had to fast a Tainas Chaloim on the second day. If you had to fast a Tainas Chaloim on the first day, then for the rest of your life, you have to fast both days of Rosh Hashanah. But if you had to fast a Tainas Chaloim on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, then for the rest of your life, you only have to fast on the second day. Now, what's the difference? So we already explained that the reason you have to fast both days, if you have to fast on the first day, is because the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are a Kedusha Arichta. They're considered one long day of Kedusha. So whatever affects the first day affects the second day. So why isn't the same thing true if you had to fast on the second day? We should say if you had to fast once on the second day, for the rest of your life, you should have to fast both days because it's a Kedusha Arichta. Explains the Chavetz Chaim in Ois Yud. Yom Sheni Bolvad, if you had to fast on the second day, then in the future you only have to fast on the second day. Why? Aval Yom Rishon Lo Yisana Klal. However, on the first day you don't have to fast at all. Lefi Sheyom Rishon Hu Da'araisa. Because let's remember that nowadays we are Bikim Bikviyah Diarcha. We have a calendar. We know which day of Rosh Hashanah is the real day. We know that the first day of Rosh Hashanah is the first day of Tishrei and is really Rosh Hashanah. The second day is Minig Aviseinu B'Yadenu, but it's really Beis Tishrei. It's really not Rosh Hashanah. Therefore, if you had to fast a Tainas Chaloim on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, which is really Beis Tishrei and is really not Rosh Hashanah, we're not going to say that for the rest of your life you have to fast on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, which is Rosh Hashanah Midaraisa. We're not going to say you should fast on a Yom Tov Daraisa, on Rosh Hashanah Daraisa, because you fasted on a Yom Tov Darabanan on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Aval Yom Rishon Lo Yisana Klal, Levi Yom Rishon Hu Daraisa, Ve'enei Nigar Achar Yom Sheni. The first day of Rosh Hashanah is a real Rosh Hashanah Midaraisa. It's not Nigrar, it's not drawn after the second day, which is only the Rabbanon. And therefore, we can't require somebody to fast on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, even Kiddush of the day on Rosh Hashanah, which is less stringent than the Kiddush of the night. You have to make Kiddush. It's a Yom Tov Midaraisa. Now we go to the Ramah. Says the Ramah, Haga ve'ein tzarich l'meisav tanis l'ta'anisai. If you do fast the Tainas Chaloim on Rosh Hashanah, we know that during the year, if you have to fast the Tainas Chaloim on Shabbos, you're required to fast another fast to get kapara for the fact that you fasted on Shabbos. Says the Ramah, if you had to fast on Rosh Hashanah, then you don't have to fast another fast to get kapara for fasting on Rosh Hashanah. Why? Continues the Ramah, the mitzvah lehisanis per Rosh Hashanah. Because there are those that hold that it's a mitzvah to fast on Rosh Hashanah. So if it's a mitzvah to fast on Rosh Hashanah, we're certainly not going to require you to go fast another fast to get kapara for the fact that you fasted on Rosh Hashanah. Continues the Ramah, Rosh Hashanah. If somebody does fast the Tainas Chaloyim on Rosh Hashanah, he does not say the tefillah of Anenu, the same way we don't say Anenu on Yom Kippur. Even though we're all fasting on Yom Kippur, we don't say Anenu b'yom tzayim ta'anisenu. We don't ask the Rabbeinu Shalom to answer our tefillahs on our fast day with the tefillah of Anenu. We don't say that on Yom Kippur, and it's also inappropriate to say it on Rosh Hashanah. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Ois Katan Yud Aleph, Ein Tzarich L'Meisav, Afilu Chal B'Shabbos. Even if Rosh Hashanah fell out on a Shabbos, and you fasted a Tainas Chaloim on Shabbos Rosh Hashanah, you don't have to fast another fast because you fasted on Rosh Hashanah, even though it was Shabbos. Ois Katan Yud Beis, the mitzvah lehisanis per Rosh Hashanah, because there are those that say that there's a mitzvah to fast in Rosh Hashanah. V'afta ein halacha kain, and even though we don't paskin that way, you could delay b'sef aleph. We're certainly not going to look at fasting on Rosh Hashanah as an avera to require you to fast another fast during the week to get kapara for the fact that you fasted on Rosh Hashanah. If somebody was makabel on himself to fast on Rosh Hashanah, we don't look at that the same way as we do somebody who was makabel on himself to fast on Rosh Hashanah or on Shabbos. Dein kabalosei klum. When we learned Tilchas Tainus, we learned if somebody tries to be makabel a Tainus on Shabbos, his kabbalah is not chal. You can't be makabel a Tainus on Shabbos. You can't be makabel a Tainus on Yom Tov. So if you try to make a kabbalah's Tainus, that kabbalah's Tainus is null and void. It doesn't mean anything. And you don't need HaTorah. However, if you are makabel Tainus to fast on Rosh Hashanah, hachat tzarich HaTorah. The Chavetz Chaim says for that, you would have to get HaTorah's Nedarim, Me'achar D'Yeshomim D'Mitzvah L'Hisanis B'Rosh Hashanah, since, as we've already discussed, there are those who hold that it's a mitzvah to fast on Rosh Hashanah. Therefore, if you're makabel Tainus on Rosh Hashanah, the Kabbalah does take effect. The Ramah said if you do fast a Tainas Chaloim or Rosh Hashanah, you don't say Anenu, Ois Katan Yud Gimel, K'may she'ein Oimrim B'Yom HaKippurim, just as we don't say the tefillah of Anenu on Yom Kippur. Why don't we say Anenu on Yom Kippur? Why don't we say Anenu on the Tainas Chaloim on Rosh Hashanah? Says the Chavetz Chaim, Me'achar shehem Yemei Din, because Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are judgment days, they're Yemei Adin. Ve'ein shayach kol kash levakesh le'onois b'yom tzayim ha'tainis. And therefore, it's inappropriate to come to the Rabbeinu Shalom and say, Anenu b'yom tzayim ta'anisenu. Why are you fasting? You're fasting because of tshuva. You're not fasting to pain yourself in order to get kapara, so that you could come to the Rabbeinu Shalom and you could come and say, I'm doing something extra. I'm fasting, and therefore answer me on the day of my fast. You're not doing something extra. You did Chatoim, and Yom Kippur especially, it's a deraisa that you must fast. Therefore, it's inappropriate for you to come and say that I deserve some kind of extra credit for the fact that I'm fasting. And therefore, this tefillah would be inappropriate. Siman Tov Kuf Tzadik Ches. There's no title for it, like we've seen already previously. And the Mechaber says, Ubay Sif Echad, we have here one sif. Excuse me. Says the Mechaber, Rosh Hashanah shechal liyos b'Shabbos. If Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos, Oimrim tzidkascha b'mincha. The Mechaber Shita is that we say the three psukim of tzidkascha. Tzidkascha tzedek la'elam asarescha emes, v'tzidkascha likim an morim asher asisa g'dolos alikim mikamecha, tzidkascha kahari kel mishpatecha ta'im rabba adam uvehema ta'ishia Hashem. In some places, it's known by the acronym of Tzutz. So the Mechaber says, if Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos, we say Tzidkascha by Mincha. Says the Ramah, there are those, he brings this from the Ran, there are those that say that we do not say Tzidkascha v'chein anu noihagim, and that is the meaning that we have. Indeed, we don't say Tzidkascha on Mincha of Shabbos when it falls out on Rosh Hashanah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in Aleph. Oimrim tzidkascha. Why? Why do you say tzidkascha even though it's a Yom Tov? Explains the Chavetz Chaim. Kevan shehu Yom Adin. Since the bottom line is that Rosh Hashanah is a Yom Adin, it's a judgment day. Oimrim tzidkascha v'tzidkascha tzidkascha mishum tziduk adin. What is tzidkascha? It's tziduk adin. We are praising the righteousness of the Rebbeinu Shalom's judgment. Well, on a judgment day, that's very appropriate. So on Rosh Hashanah, says the Mechaber, we say tzidkascha. Shaharei on Oimrim vayigba Hashem tzvakos b'mishpat v'akel HaKadosh nikdash b'tzedakah. We're talking about judgment and about the Rebbeinu Shalom's tzidkus during the other tefillos on Rosh Hashanah. So why not say tzidkascha? However, the Ramah brings down to say Yomrim, Sfirlu, they hold, the Halkal Panim Yom Tov over Rosh Chodesh. It's still a Yom Tov, and since it's a Yom Tov, and Rosh Hashanah is also Rosh Chodesh, therefore it's inappropriate to say tzidkascha. We don't speak about the Rebbeinu Shalom's judgment with this extra statement of tzidkascha. Siman Tavkov Tzadik Tes of B'Sif Echad says the Mechaber Sif Aleph Leil Rosh Hashanah Shechal Lihi Yais B'Motzai Shabbos. When Rosh Hashanah night is also Motzai Shabbos. Now this could only happen. It's the second night of Rosh Hashanah. The first night of Rosh Hashanah cannot be Motzai Shabbos. Rosh Hashanah doesn't fall out on a Sunday. So this must mean when Rosh Hashanah was Shabbos and Sunday, so the second night of Rosh Hashanah is Motzei Shabbos. Rosh Hashanah Leil Rosh Hashanah Shechal Yos b'Motzei Shabbos. When Rosh Hashanah night is Motzei Shabbos, Oimrim V'Toidienu, we insert the paragraph of V'Toidienu to make Havdalah in our Ma'ariv Shmona Esrei, to make Havdalah between Shabbos and the second day of Rosh Hashanah, which is essentially a weekday. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut in Aleph, Leil Rosh Hashanah. Haminig the minig is shemispalin b'toich hasiddur, that you daven Ma'ariv on Motzei Shabbos from a siddur, av shalei berechu adayin berchas b'orei ma'orei ha'esh, even though you did not yet make a bracha b'orei ma'orei ha'esh. This is very interesting. What's at play over here? Well, what the Chavetz Chaim is saying is, you might have thought that how could you use a siddur on Motzei Shabbos before you made a bracha of B'orei Ma'orei Ha'esh? By davening with the siddur, by the light of the torches that were in the shul, you're being nene from the fire before you made the bracha of B'orei Ma'orei Ha'esh. It's almost as if we're treating the bracha of B'orei Ma'orei Ha'esh as a birchas hanenin. It's like making a shahakal on a cup of water. You can't drink the water until you make the shahakal. So how could you be nene from the fire? How could you be nene from the light of the flames before you go ahead and make a bracha of B'orei Ma'orei Ha'esh? Says the Chavetz Chaim, the minig is that we do use the light of the torches, even though we didn't make a bracha B'orei Ma'orei Ha'esh. And he continues and he says, V'ayin b'shari tshuva, hatam she'ein za hana gemura, because that's not considered a real hana. T'ksash gura b'fiv, because how much do you really need the light of the candles? You know the Shemona Esrei more or less by heart, and therefore it's not considered such a hana. If somebody wants to be makmir, he can be makmir for himself. There's a lot spoken about this, that essentially the bracha of B'orei Ma'orei Ha'esh is not really a birchas hanenin, and you did make in the bracha during your birchas Kriya Shema, you make a bracha of Yoitzer HaMa'oros, that also is a bracha over light, and therefore there's no problem of being nene from light before you make a B'orei Ma'orei Ha'esh. Ice cut beis Omer V'Toidienu, we're mavdil in Shemona Esrei with the paragraph of V'Toidienu. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Av she'omer by v'chagigas haregel, even though in the paragraph of V'Toidienu we use the words chagigas haregel, v'Rosh Hashanah ein a regel, how could we say v'chagigas haregel on Rosh Hashanah? The Shalish Regalim are Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Rosh Hashanah is not really called a regel. It's not one of the Regalim. Mikamakim, nevertheless, ki hechi darbinon b'motzai Yom Tov, b'havdalah ben Yom HaShvi l'sheishes yemei ha'maaseh. We when we make havdalah in Shemona Esrei, when we say Atachan Antanu, we say that the Rebbeinu Shalom is mavdil ben Yom HaShvi l'sheishes yemei ha'maaseh. Oh, I'm sorry. On Motzei Yom Tov, when we make Havdalah, we also mention the concept of being mavdil between Shabbos and the Chol. Even though we're being mavdil between Yom Tov and the Chol, on Motzei Yom Tov, we're not being mavdil between Shabbos and the Chol. So why do we mention Ben Yom HaShvi L'Sheishes Yemai Ma'aseh? And the reason is the Armina Seder Havdalah is Humayne. We're just mentioning in our Havdalah the different types of Havdalahs that the Rabbeinu Shalom makes. And one of them is the fact that he's Mavdal Ben Yom HaShvi L'Sheishes Yemai Ma'aseh. Hachidami, so too over here, when we mention in Vatoydiyenu Chagigas HaRegel, Seder HaTikun Hu Omer. We're mentioning different things that the Chazal were Mesakin and that the Torah is Mesakin. And one of them is Chagigas HaRegel, that we have the Yom Tovim. Okay, let's start Siman Tov Reish. Beitza shenolda b'Rosh Hashanah v'dinei HaKiddush u'boi gimel seifim. The halacha of an egg that was laid by a hen on Rosh Hashanah and the halachas that pertain to Kiddush. And here we have 3 seifim. Says the Mechaber, Beitza shenolda b'Yom Tov HaRishon. If a hen lays an egg on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, v'chein ma shenitzoid boi, or an animal that becomes trapped on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, v'chein ma shenislash boi, or any type of produce that became uprooted on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, like an apple that came off the tree, Aser basheni, it remains Aser on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. What's at play over here? Well, we know an egg that's laid on Yom Tov is Aser on that day because it's muktzah. If it was laid on Yom Tov, it's muktzah because it was not muchan at the outset of Yom Tov. At the outset of Yom Tov, this egg was inside the hen, so it was not prepared for Yom Tov use. So if it's laid on Yom Tov, it remains muktzah. It was muktzah at the outset of Yom Tov, it remains muktzah for the entire Yom Tov. But normally, a beitza shenolda b'Yom Tov Rishon, if an egg is laid by a hen on the first day of Yom Tov, let's say the first day of Pesach, we could be matir it on the second day of Pesach. Why? Because we have a mamon of shach. We say, well, look, we know one of these 2 days of Yom Tov is not the real day. So if the first day of Yom Tov was the real day of Yom Tov, okay, the hen laid the egg on the first day of Yom Tov. It's also for the first day of Yom Tov because of muktzah. But now on the second day of Yom Tov, which is really weekday, it's really chayil, it should be mutter. Because why should it be aser? If yesterday was Yom Tov, then today is chayil. If today is chayil, the egg is not muktzah. You'll tell me it should be aser because of hachana? What hachana? It was laid on Yom Tov and now it's chayil. Yom Tov is allowed to be meichin for chayil. So usually we have a mamon of shach, and usually we say that the egg that was laid on the first day of Yom Tov should be mutter on the second day of Yom Tov. But by Rosh Hashanah we cannot say that. Why? Because like we explained earlier, the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are considered a Kedusha Richta. They're considered one long day of Yom Tov. And therefore, if the egg was aser on the first day of Yom Tov, it remains aser on the second day of Yom Tov. Says the Mishnah Berurah, aser b'sheni. Afal gav de b'shar Yom Tov mutter b'sheni mikayach miman of shach. Even though normally, if a hen lays an egg on the first day of Yom Tov, it's mutter on the second day of Yom Tov because of the miman of shach, like I explained. Im Yom Rishon hu kodesh hasheni hu chayil, v'hasheni kodesh rishon hu chayil. Hacha aser, but on Rosh Hashanah it's aser for both days. The tarvayu chada kiddushti. Now let's just read the words of the Ramah back on Samach Tes Amud Aleph Hagah. Ukvar nispar le'el Siman Tov Kuf Yud Gimel Sif Hey Siman Tov Kuf Tes Vav Sif Aleph. That's where we explain at length the halachas that pertain to a beitza shenolda b'Yom Tov. Okay, a little bit of an abbreviated share today, but we're going to stop over here with Sif Beis. Mir Hashem. We will continue tomorrow with Sif Beis. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Schus of limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua's refuahs and parnasa to all those in need, and we should be zeicher to see the Bias Gal Tzedek b'meher v'yameinu. Amen.